Hi there, this is Matt with State of Flex, here with a review for Godzilla Final Wars, the final entry of the Millennium era Godzilla films that I will be exploring before moving on to the legendary films. And this one acts in kind of a way as Avengers Endgame did, in the sense that this was meant to be the culmination of everything you've watched before. Because the plan with this film was it was to be released on the 50th anniversary of the release of the original Gojira film from 1954. And they were taking a pause, and no plans to release a Godzilla movie for another 10 years at minimum. And it would be 10 years before we got another film. We'll talk about that next week. So with this movie, they kind of did away with what a lot of the Millennium films had been doing, which was, with those ones, just doing a direct sequel to the original Godzilla film. This one, I don't really know what the continuity is. You're in a world full of monsters, and monsters are everywhere, monsters galore, monsters. And Godzilla is put on ice right in the beginning of the film. You open with like glorious Godzilla content before he disappears for the next 40 minutes. In that time, monsters rise everywhere, and what this film ends up being is a almost direct remake of Godzilla, or of Destroy All Monsters. And that was one of the Godzilla films I liked best of the Showa era. And this is a film that feels the most Showa era-y of all of the Godzilla Millennium films, and really honestly of all the Heisei films. And that works to the film's benefit and detriment. Throughout the film, I'm tickled repeatedly because I'm being reminded and seeing characters that I haven't seen on screen in some time. It's like 30, 40 years. This opens up with Manda. He has a cool little scene, and the digital effects in that moment look good. The digital effects throughout the film are a little iffy, but that part looked really good. Then you are given Gigan. You haven't seen Gigan since the 70s. Hedorah, my favorite of the Godzilla vs. era in the Showa era period. You're given just so many. Pretty much every character from the past gets revisited. You have Rodan again for the first time. We get a revisit of Mothra. You have King Caesar's in this movie. It's really cool. They threw pretty much everybody in with the exception of like Megalon and Jet Jaguar, which was really cool. But they only brought back the Showa era characters. They didn't bring back any of the Heisei ones, which was a disappointment. I would have liked to have seen Biollante again. That would have been kind of cool. Or Space Godzilla or Destroyer. Yet sadly they did not get acknowledged in this tip of the hat to the old days. But there's kind of a surface level quality to the film, and it's just like, yeah, you're getting tickled with all the reminiscing of all these monsters that you've seen before. Sometimes this movie executes it better, sometimes for the worse. I think using kind of a digital Anguirus throughout a lot of the film didn't really play well for me, but it was great seeing Anguirus again because he was one of my favorite characters, and we haven't seen him in like 30 years. That was so cool. But then the film is kind of weirdly ugly. Like, they fell in love with the whole putting a filter on things to desaturate color or make everything sepia toned or yellow for whatever reason, or green or whatever. It tries to take like a Matrix inspiration with using, or Saw at that time too, inspiration by putting just these filters over everything, and everything has kind of a bland ugliness to it. Yet the set decoration and the costuming looks really cool. They brought like an anime flair, or a Matrixy probably, flair to the costuming, and that worked for me, but then with how ugly it's shot, it just kind of falls a little flat. The film also taps into the whole alien of it all, and I don't like aliens. This brings back the Zillions from the Showa era as well, and I don't like when Godzilla goes alien-y. And I said that many times back in my Showa era reviews, and this one does it again. And where it worked for me a little bit in Destroy All Monsters, it falls a little more flat here because there's not a lot of tissue to connect it all. That worked as kind of a movie, and this is just a film that works in segments. And I guarantee you, if you just watch if you want to look up Godzilla versus Zilla, which is a great scene, on YouTube and watch that in 90 seconds or whatever it is, where Godzilla takes on the American Godzilla and just beats the absolute shit out of him, you're going to be entertained as all can be. And there's a lot of moments like that throughout this entire runtime. But as a cohesive set, it's not really that strong. I laughed out loud when Minya showed up. Last time we saw Minya was, truthfully, Godzilla's Revenge or Attack, All Monsters Attack, whatever you want to call it. Sure, we got a baby Godzilla in the Heisei era, but didn't look like Minya. This was a true Minya back again. I laughed out loud when I saw him and, had the, oh man, they're really hitting us with the nostalgia feels. Man, I don't like that character. And he's purely there just to give us an ending where somebody saves humanity, and it's a Godzilla himself. And, I don't know. And the weird thing is the introduction of Godzilla, you're going back and they show you just, little glimpses of all the different Godzilla movies before. You do see glimpses of the Heisei era, so this film can be a sequel to whichever Godzilla movie you wish it to be a sequel to. You can create your own canon for what this movie works with. However, it is so tonally all over the place, it can't really work with any individual Godzilla film, I don't feel. And that's kind of a bummer, but it almost reads as if this is the Godzilla that rose at the end of Godzilla vs. Destroya, because you do see that silhouetted shot from that movie, the way that movie ends, and then when you first see this Godzilla again, it's almost the exact same replica of a shot, suggesting that this is a continuation of that era of films. But this just doesn't feel like a Heisei era film in any stretch of the imagination. So it's just kind of one of those weird placements. Where would you, audience, place this as a continuity? Or is this a continuity list one-off that has all movies are part of the continuity, but no movies are? It's kind of interesting and compelling film in that sense. Speaking to some of the positives, I really liked the American character. It says so much about what the Japanese feel American sensibilities would enjoy, based on his characterization alone as muscle man with samurai sword that talks kind of like this throughout the entire time. It has a very kind of Resident Evil almost feel to it, or very video gamey. You can see a strong video game influence throughout the entire film. Especially in its visual flourishes, which would have worked really well. It's shot well, it's just photographed poorly because of the damn filters. But also when they dip into New York, when Rodan takes on New York, and you see American characters talking to each other, the idea of what Japanese think that we act like and behave is really quite amusing, and it's something that I can't even criticize, because when we do the same thing and portray Japanese characters talking to each other, we probably do just as badly and just as offensively, and it's I'm sure it's groaner, eye-rolling, laugh-out-loud moments for them as well. So I can't criticize that. I actually kind of applaud it. It's weird dig at the U.S. That I kind of enjoy, whether it was intentional or not. The cultural differences and how they perceive us is pretty fascinating. The Godzilla battling is pretty cool. It's great having the ultimate reveal. He's fighting this big bad throughout the end of the film that we've never seen before. It's a new monster, and I was like, I think they call it Monster X or Monster X2 or something like that. And I was like, he looks kind of like, has anybody out there seen the 1990s film The Guyver with Mark Hamill? It looked like what the Zoonoids looked like from those movies. and particularly the monsters in the second movie. That's what it looked like to me. And I was like, why would they have him fight a random character? Until ultimately it's revealed that it isn't that monster, it's Ghidorah, and Ghidorah breaks free. I would have liked a fully real Ghidorah. It's often digital, and the digital doesn't make it look good, and he's a little too small. I would have liked him to be bigger and more menacing, but he's not quite. That said, that of course it's going to come down to Godzilla versus Ghidorah, as it should. He was kind of the big bad of the Showa era, and if this movie is a nod to those films, of course it's got to be him. So that worked for me. I like lots of this movie, and I think it's ultimately a good movie. It's one I'd recommend, but it's one of the worst of the Millennium era films. I think it's certainly better than Godzilla 2000, but it's nowhere near as good as Megaguirus against Mechagodzilla or Tokyo SOS, and far and away nowhere near as good as Giant Monsters All Out Attack. So I give it 3 stars. It's good. This is the end game for Godzilla, but it should be better. It should have hit those emotional beats. It should have had me caring more, but instead I'm just kind of constantly shown things that get like the juices pumping because like, hey, that hit a nostalgia, but it feels hollow at the same time. And I think it would have been bumped up better if it had a better look to it, but it just doesn't. That filter thing bothers me, and the busyness. This is a busy movie. Like, it's just non-stop stuff happening that it doesn't allow any moments to breathe, except for when like Minya shows up, which is kind of random. That's the area with which to breathe, and that dude has like maybe 4 minutes total of screen time, and that's probably being generous. It just is a constant movie, and it's way longer than all the other Godzilla movies. It's 2 hours and 5 minutes, and of all the Japanese films, I think that's far and away the longest. I don't think any of the other ones broached the 2-hour mark. So for this to do that, it felt its length, even though it's constantly happening. Stuff is just ever happening. There's a cool motorcycle sword battle kind of thing that happens that comes out of nowhere. That was kind of neat. It has Hedorah. It was great seeing Hedorah again. We haven't seen him since Hedorah Horror of the Deep. As I say, Smog Monster's there. He's completely wasted. Smog Monster is such a cool villain, and he's wasted in this. But it was great seeing him again. But yeah, they also had so many costumes that they had to make for this that everybody just kind of looks like a low-budget version of it, even compared to how they looked in the Showa era. Like, it should look way better, and their faces move better, but they don't look as textured or organic, I guess. You could particularly tell with Rodan and with the Smog Monster. They just look a little flat. But anyway, I've talked about Godzilla Final Wars enough. This is a good movie. It should be a great movie. But this was a designed send-off for a prolonged period of time from the Godzilla universe. I'm going to take some time away from reviewing the last Japanese Godzilla film, Shin Godzilla, until I'm done reviewing the 3, as of now, the trilogy of Godzilla Legendary films that the Warner Brothers and Legendary Pictures did. Because I feel like those 3 films really work as a set. And I'm not going to cover Kong Skull Island because I plan on doing a King Kong retrospective someday, and I'll tackle that one then. That said, Shin Godzilla comes in between some of those movies, and I want to keep that separate because that should be the finale of this walk down memory lane. So yeah, next week you are going to get the first attempt of Warner Brothers' legendary monster universe with Godzilla 2014. Let me know what you thought of this film in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Peace.